Welcome to Higher Ed Athletics. I am back with another episode. Fortunate to have the UNC Charlotte Chancellor, Dr. Sharon Gaber, on the podcast. Dr. Gaber, thanks for joining Higher Ed Athletics.
Thanks for having me here today.
Well, I've been to your campus 2 times that I can remember. I'm sure I've been there even passing through Charlotte before, but I'm just always taken back by how beautiful it is and just how the scope, how big it is. And so one thing that I've been fortunate to recently is I worked in President Witten's office at IU on the IU Indianapolis campus, which higher ed people and athletics people know it as IUPUI. And it's since changed between the presidents of both IU and Purdue. Then former Governor Mitch Daniels, they agreed to disband IUPUI. And so when I heard President Witten's vision for what IU Indianapolis could be, that it's kind of launching into now, I immediately thought of UNC Charlotte as like a model for what it could look like. You have a quote saying every great city has a great university. And so I always like that. But the first thing I wanted to ask you, kind of thinking of that, is Charlotte is really on the cusp of becoming an R1, so top tier research status in 2025. Could you explain the strategy and work that's had to go in across your institution to kind of get you in that position right now?
Yeah, thank you. When I got here in 2020 in the height of COVID, which was kind of an interesting time to start as a university chancellor, we put together a strategic plan. And part of that was we are the public research university in Charlotte. And Charlotte's the 15th largest city in the US. So really, as I started talking to the community, they're like, we need a strong, very high research university. We were a high research university, we're an R2. And so we incorporated that into our strategic plan and said, we want to be an R1. I think that's important, not just for the university, but for the Charlotte area, for this part of North Carolina. The closest R1 to the city of Charlotte is more than 2 hours away. And given that we are a large metropolitan area, it was important. So the faculty, they got excited about that. They all dug in, they did more work. We restructured our research office and put in some new leadership that was very participatory, very supportive, very encouraging. And it's happened. And it really did happen actually faster than we thought it might happen. But that's always a good thing. So that's a good problem to have. And it is now that colleges are competing to see who can get more research funding. And I'd say the interesting thing along the way with all of this is we're still producing the graduates, and we still have the large number of undergraduates that are doing research, working in labs. So we're not trading one for the other. We're doing both the teaching mission and making sure we graduate students, but we're also doing more research and making sure we partner a lot more in the community and across the state and across the nation.
Yeah, I think just the different research centers and buildings that I saw when I was on campus, because those are things I pay attention to. I think there was even a motorsports building that I saw, and I'm a NASCAR fan, and I know that's obviously a hotbed there in North Carolina for NASCAR. But yeah, it just seems like it's everywhere, the research activity.
We have a current student in engineering who has won a couple of NASCAR races. He's got a NASCAR team. So it's kind of fun to see and see the strong connections.
That is cool. Yeah, so you kind of mentioned your strategic plan. I believe it's called Shaping What's Next. And so based on where we're at now, we're not quite halfway there, but we're inching towards the halfway point. And it sort of started while COVID was still lingering. But how's that going? And then you kind of mentioned how the research component helps the city of Charlotte, but just what's the kind of the metrics you're using to kind of make sure that you're progressing the way you all would like at your institution?
Yeah, well, and anybody can take a look online because we've posted some of the metrics to be able to keep track. And every year we present to the Board of Trustees. I mean, one of the things we talk about in it is the Charlotte model, and it's how we're being intentional and purposeful about ensuring that our students will come here and retain and graduate. And so, like this year, we've added over 20 additional academic advisors because what we found is as we've grown in enrollment that we didn't have enough academic advisors, and that's a key to success because we have a large percentage of first generation students. But our strategic plan really does talk about how are we ensuring students succeed? What are we doing with research? What are we doing with our community to make sure we're connecting? You mentioned we're slightly outside of the downtown, which here is called Uptown, part of Charlotte. And so we've got 8 miles between the campus and Uptown Charlotte, and we have to make sure we're connecting there and that we're visible. So we do a lot of things to draw that connection and make sure that people see all the great things that's going on at their large public research university.
Yeah, and the positioning, that's probably where my experience. So I went to IUPI as an undergrad, and I work for IU administration, but I'm located out of the IU Indianapolis office, and I would say that the benefit to being like a large city but not downtown is you could have growth.
Yeah.
When you're
Yes.
downtown, you're obviously limited. You're probably surrounded by interstates. You're probably got other buildings. Real estate's a lot more expensive to come by, or when you're requesting it from the state house.
Yeah.
So I think I had went from downtown to or uptown to the Charlotte campus when I visited, and
Yeah.
it's really close, and you could see how it's connected. But I mean, you couldn't have your capacity for growth would be a lot different if you weren't in the position that you're in now, right?
Absolutely. But you also saw we have a light rail connection that
Yep.
takes, so all of our students have a light rail pass. They take that uptown to be able to go to events uptown. And we also have a building up there, and we're expanding what we're doing in the what is called now the Dubois Center, which is the UNC Charlotte Center City area. So we've expanded that.
Well, what I do like, and we'll get to sports in a little bit, but I also like that there's an on-campus awesome stadium that I snuck into and got a selfie on when I was there. But I like that even though you're near downtown, you're not sending your football team to like a downtown NFL stadium.
Right.
So I like that you got that on-campus feel. So we'll get to that in a little bit. I kind of want to go back to something I study. So I'm in the higher education doctorate program at IU, and studying right now for my dissertation is normative career patterns of college presidents and athletic directors. But your background, I would say, closely aligns with like what the normative career would be. You've got your doctorate, and you had been a provost and worked your way up the administrative. Also started in faculty. I'm curious about the specific situation when you were hired. So it was during COVID, as you'd mentioned. But your background, so you have 3 degrees in the areas of economics and city and regional planning. Just kind of curious, was that obviously you had done great work as an administrator to put yourself in that position? You were the president at Toledo, another great institution. I had their athletic director on recently, and I visited their campus recently. But kind of just thinking about that faculty expertise and your academic expertise, was that a fit based on what Charlotte was about to be doing with the strategic plan and the vision, or would you say it was more about your career background instead of necessarily the academia?
I would say it's a little of each. I mean, it's really nice. You know, obviously the Board of Trustees hires the Chancellor here
Mm-hmm.
with approval from the UNC system and the Board of Governors. But what the Board of Trustees here has said is that every chancellor that has been here comes at an opportune time and has this perfect fit. I'm only the 5th chancellor of UNC Charlotte. So when you think about that, I mean, it's a relatively young university. I think the city planning thing clearly helps, and it certainly made the opportunity attractive to me because what I know is my predecessors, and I've had the opportunity to meet 2 of the previous chancellors. Phil Dubois and Jim Woodward. So Phil was right before me and Jim was right before him. And they are still, Phil's in Georgia and Jim is local here. And I spend time talking to them. Each one helped build this university and helped grow what we've done, added doctoral programs and expanded the research and sort of just elevated or added buildings. I think now I come in and what we've got is this really good university, and I'm trying to take the component pieces and help elevate it to be a really outstanding university, which it is. So I kind of see the big picture in terms of being an urban planner. I also see the importance of connecting to uptown Charlotte and making sure that we're reaching into the city. Because if we're not, all of our corporate support is uptown. A lot of our alums are uptown, and we can't be a university that's 8 miles away just saying, oh, we're happy sitting here and not reaching out. So I think the urban planner in me says it's all about community engagement. How do we say we're reaching out and making sure that we're active? So getting our faculty and our students ingrained in things across the city.
So higher ed obviously models after each other quite a bit with when they're trying to change. Was there you mentioned the Charlotte model, but in your head, whenever you're all planning the strategic plan and the vision you have, I mean, are there other institutions in certain cities that you're kind of aspirational peers that you're looking at?
Oh, I think there are all the time. Georgia State is an example of what's been held up for having great student success and sort of changing the trajectory. Our programming is probably very similar to what they have done that improved retention and graduation rates. Our demographics are somewhat similar. And when we started talking about becoming an R1 university, there was a perceived tension that you couldn't be focused on student success and be a very high research university. I said, look at Georgia State, they're doing it. We can do that. And we're very sensitive here that we want our students to be successful. We want to retain them. We want to graduate them. So we're doing all of that, but we've enhanced the research, and we do it we call it the Charlotte model, but it really is about intrusive advising and making sure that students stay on track and that we're reaching out and we're being proactive, just not sitting back and saying, oh, well, if they need help, they'll come ask us.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia State's one of the best models for a lot in higher education. And it does fit. Like when you say that, I mean, the same trip that I visited UNC Charlotte was a trip that I visited Georgia State, and so I would say they're quite similar in many ways. So that's great to hear. I want to shift gears a little bit to more of your leadership strategy when it comes to your chancellor's cabinet. Always kind of curious when I get a president or a chancellor on to ask them about your cabinet, both as a group and individuals, what your approach is as far as how often you meet, or what a chancellor's cabinet meeting looks like under Dr. Gaber.
Okay, so the cabinet as a group meets every week. We meet every Tuesday afternoon. And actually that was an intentional thing to move it to Tuesdays. When I first got here, it was on Mondays, and everyone's like, there are some times that we actually want to take a day off one side or the other. So I'm like, it is important that people have the ability to take a day off, because everybody needs that flexibility for themselves or for their family. So I'm all for that. So every Tuesday afternoon, we get together and talk about whatever topics there are. Usually there's an agenda, but there's always an opportunity we go around and hear what's new or burning with everybody. I'd also then say the group meets, but I also meet one-on-one. And depending upon the cabinet position, I meet one-on-one either weekly or every 2 weeks with the individuals. Like I am down the hall from my general counsel. So I am scheduled to meet with him every 2 weeks. If there's something burning before that, he is in my office in a heartbeat. So that's not an issue. But the provost I meet with every week, the CFO I meet with every week, vice chancellor for advancement I meet with every week. Now the comms person I meet with every 2 weeks. And that, for example, is the assistant vice chancellor for communications reports actually into advancement, but because of the position, it's so important. It sits on the cabinet because everybody needs to know what is the comms plan, for example. Vice chancellor for research I meet with about every 10 days. So, I mean, it's an interesting mix just based on how significant, how large, and how typically academic affairs, there's something every week that's coming up that we have to make sure we're touching base about.
And I should have done my homework on this, but is Mike Hill on the
He
cabinet?
is.
Okay.
He absolutely is.
And so
I meet with him about every 10 days, but he and I text probably
that's what I was going to ask.
every other day. Yeah.
Not to mention, if you find yourself at sporting events, you're probably going to see him. So there, it's not like there's anything going on in the world of college athletics that you would need to talk that much between a president and an athletic director. But one question I also always ask, kind of a follow up to the cabinet, is people that want to become athletic directors say they might already be a deputy athletic director right now, and those are the ones that listen to this the most. One thing that they don't know yet is how to sit on a chancellor's cabinet, because yes, they're on the senior leadership team in the athletic department, but they're not sitting across from the VP of student life or the VC of research for the whole institution. So, I mean, what would your recommendation be for someone that is ready to assume that job of being an athletic director that has focused their whole life on college athletics, but hopefully they've been on a college campus long enough, but how they can be kind of a good team player, what their mindset needs to be when they become a cabinet member as an athletic director?
Yeah, well, and we have some really great, both senior executive, associate athletic directors, or deputy athletic directors. What I'd say is trying to understand the university as a whole and the way things work. And that is, part of it is historical. And I would tell you that every campus is a little bit different in the ways that those things work. And some of it, even for a new chancellor, coming in and understanding how communication flows and what do you need to do to help that, or alter it or improve it. So what I have seen is really spending some time understanding that and then getting to know people. Clearly, there is a connection between athletics and academic affairs. Most frequently, you find that in sort of the student athlete athletics part and looking at, what's the compliance pieces and all of that. But actually, for somebody to sit down with the provost or an associate provost and understand what's on their mind, that's a really interesting thing. And just as an aside, back when I was a provost, I had a young employee, this was at Arkansas, in the athletics department, come and say, yeah, I wanted to come meet with you because I had no idea what a provost was, but I want to know so that I can learn. And I thought, that was bold, but it showed a lot of initiative. And I thought, okay, I want to sit and talk to you. That individual, in fact, is a VP at a university now, and I've been watching his career. So it sort of set him up to understand what are these other positions and how do they interact with athletics. I have found, when I was a provost, I met regularly with a deputy athletics director to understand what were pain points, what were issues, how do we help? Not that we were going to change the world for athletics, but that in fact, other students were having these issues. If we improved our processes or improved things we were doing, it would help everybody. So, as somebody who likes input and likes to hear what are some issues, I would take it from deans, I would hear it from athletics, I would hear it from student affairs. It was helpful to me.
Yeah, that's an awesome story that you know someone that actually asked that. So I spent a decade in college athletics before I joined President Witten's staff, and it was so interesting because you think you know what a cabinet does or like what these roles are, as you mentioned, but all of a sudden I'm working every day with all the members of the cabinet, and now I still in my role now I still work in an office that has is where all of our VPs work out of
Yeah.
Indianapolis, and it just made me think about how I study the athletic director position. I like to talk to athletic directors, and coming up, a lot of them aren't exposed to these people, and
Right.
that you're going to work every day with these. You're going to interact, and so seeing how the IU athletic director interacts with the VPs of HR or any type of position, and you really see how functional a cabinet can be. And so it is important that people get these experiences where they can kind of learn. Maybe not go and just go to the provost and say, "Hey, I don't have any idea what you do,"
Right.
uh, but finding some way where in their current roles, I think it was Ross Bjork, who's now at Ohio State, but when he was at Texas A&M, he had told me on the podcast that he used to send his staff um, to find their counterpart on campus and say, you're the deputy AD, but who's the second in charge of in this office. It's such a good idea that I think more people need to be intentional if they want to learn more about higher education.
Well, because communication doesn't flow evenly on a university campus, I've started a meeting, and I had started at Toledo. I've done it here now also. So once a month, I have a group which is called the Charlotte Leadership Team, which fits conveniently CLT for Charlotte. And we do that once a month, and it is top level and next level individuals. So director of housing, which is an associate vice chancellor under student affairs, all of the deans, all of the police chief, the head of safety and security, anybody who's a deputy or executive athletics director, and the AD. And it's because I want people to know who those people are that are next level. And PS, when there's an issue over whether it's undergraduate education, or if it is in housing, or if it is in facilities management, if people don't know who those other people are, and if everybody doesn't hear the same information at the same time, and that people are interpreting data points and we're not having a conversation about it, or that they're not hearing my say, this is a priority area, or somebody else saying, here's what we have coming up. So I view that as an important opportunity to get people together and hear information. And even when there's a narrative they might have heard, ask the question, is this accurate or not accurate? So I've tried to do what I can to enhance communications in that way.
That's a great idea to bring those people together. And then we didn't even mention the branding, CLT. Yeah, so I spent a whole 20 minutes probably talking to Mike on the podcast about the rebrand, and I love it. It's probably one of the best rebrand case studies out there that people need to study. But doing the airport code CLT, my wife used to work in private aviation, so I knew what CLT meant before probably most people. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that's good.
I mean, it's funny because you talk about the branding with Mike. I don't know if you knew, athletics had a brand, and the university had a brand. And I think it was my first year here, and Mike was here before I was. And so they were moving to the All NC. And, I got here and said, well, why do we have something different? In my mind, Michigan has the big M, and that goes from football to medicine to philosophy, right? I mean, it's everywhere. Or Ohio State has the O. Why would we want to have two different marks and have people confused? So for us, as a less known brand, having one mark that, or one logo that helps unify the campus, and we've pulled together around it, helps unify the campus, helps people identify. Now I'll wear it or somebody else will wear it, and you'll be at the airport, or, you know, even I have been in other cities and people are like, that's Charlotte, right? I'm like, yes, you know, happily, glad you recognize it.
Yeah, it's a great brand, and I do think more institutions need to just do the one. I was at Indiana State Athletics I took a 1-year gap, as I tell people, left the president's office, went to Indiana State. I thought I wanted to get back in athletics, realized quickly, no, I just want to be back at IU and higher education. But they did this rebrand, and I never understood why they had such a awesome athletic logo, but I think they would have been much better to adopt it as an institution. And I said, you know, look at Charlotte, like you need to look at that. So they haven't taken my the new president of NESA hasn't taken my advice yet on that, but hopefully they'll take the new logo. So I want to finally get into some athletic talk. For those listening are probably really curious about, they recently read in the D1 ticker about some changes to the stadium, which I think it's been out there for a while that the stadium is, kind of doing a phase 1 approach, but
Yes.
they're calling it the Evergreen Athletics Facility Master Vision. Just kind of curious if you can speak to any highlights or progress of these that the audience might be interested in.
Yeah, and you know, I think there was a recent story in D1 ticker, so we're excited. We've got a $70 million expansion of our football facility that will go up. We have a small area right now that has a couple of suites, and obviously it has, you know, communications and visiting AD box and that sort of thing. But it's going to go up. It will have club seats. It will have additional suites. And then we're going to have a dining area in that. So we had originally talked about it as a $60 million project. And then our dining put in $10 million in institutional trust funds to be able to build out their area, which will also give us the opportunity to have a training table in there, you know, all year round and between games. So we're excited about that. That will go, we will break ground August 2025. We expect completion in anywhere between 12 and 24 months from that time. Maybe a little bit sooner. Hopefully it'll be closer to 12 to 13 or 14, but we're excited about that.
Will they be able to play during that phase?
That is the game plan. There may be 1 or 2 games where we have to move, but it is being phased and scheduled that we would continue to play there. So it may mean that, for example, the Chancellor's suite is not operable, but hopefully the rest of it will be. And then phase 2 would be the additional seating on the sides of that tower. And, you know, we're still fundraising for phase 2. So that'll be a separate project. As part of the Evergreen Facilities Master Vision, though, we also then have the softball clubhouse, which includes locker rooms, offices, training room, meeting space, and that will be completed in March 2025. Then we're looking to be able to do more in baseball and then do basketball locker room renovation. So that's all part of this facilities master vision. Another interesting piece that really isn't part of this, but you know, last year we completed a $10 million, we got a gift, anonymous gift for $10 million for a student tailgate park, which is called the 49th Acre. And I'll tell you that people come and they look at it and they can't believe, but it is very proximate to our football stadium. And so there's now, and our student tailgate area was not previously proximate. So the gift was a donor saying, I want to do something not to football, but that might help football. So moving a student tailgate area to a facility or a location that's proximate to the football stadium has meant, and if you look, and again, reading in D1 ticker, our football attendance, I think, was up 107%. I was reading that and was really impressed because students now go and tailgate and then go to the game because the way where it's located, you tailgate and you have to go right past the stadium if you're going back to the residence halls. So you might as well come in and make sure you're enjoying the game, and then you can go home. So that's been very successful also.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that this is going to be good for the future trajectory of the program and the campus. But I did watch. So I was at the IU Charlotte football game. I was at IU, and
Yeah.
my 8-year-old was there, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I've been to that campus. It's a really awesome place, and the gave us a scare going in the first half of the game, and so it was like 14-17, and the program's been, I mean, you can definitely tell it's improved and that it is improving, and that coach has a cool character about him too, wearing the short sleeves even in the cold weather.
That's right.
So I really I'm bullish on the future of Charlotte football, and the stadium is gonna. The stadium is already a really good stadium, and I would tell people this to look at the phases, because the phases is really just about growing it and make it better. But it's not like it's like this tiny stadium. It is a very well built brick stadium, and it's like a U shape, and I love it. So it's hopefully it's not going to lose that character with the growth.
Right. No, I don't think so. I mean, we currently seat about 16,000. I think the goal is to get up to the mid 20s, 25,000, something like that. So this next phase will get up a couple thousand seats, and then there would be another phase that would get us up. Maybe it's 21,000, something like that.
Well, kind of keeping with that phase, I must ask, as a chancellor of an institution seeking to be top tier research, it already shows that you all are very competitive and kind of bullish on where you want to be. But does the planner background in you kind of think about getting to a power conference one day changes the trajectory of the institution itself and the possibilities?
Well, I don't want to speak really into the future. We're really happy to be part of the American Athletic Conference. That was a great move for us last year, and that's been fantastic. And you probably saw, the outcome of the Tulane game wasn't what we hoped for, but having Sports Center on campus here and being able to do live, that was on Halloween. So we have seen the benefits in moving to a stronger athletics conference, and the American has been fantastic. I think we know that we're in a great city with strong value, obviously in Charlotte. As we build our brand and reputation, and as football and basketball continue to strengthen, I think the future is always wide open, but we have to say the American has been great, and I want to continue to grow in that conference.
And I was not asking that to upset the American commissioner, but
I was going to say, there you go.
Here's my thought on this is not knowing what your answer would be, but it kind of goes into my next question about the college football playoff potential as a group of five, because I'm not sold on anyone needing to jump to a power conference anymore, because you still have March Madness is not going to change, at least hopefully. So you still get that exposure if your basketball's winning. But then also I really do think we're seeing this first year of the college football playoff where a group of five they're going to be talked about all season long. And so as long as you're winning, your institution's always going to be talked about, because the whole season people are going to be talking about, well, who's going to be that group of five?
Right.
And so I don't know that obviously the money comes with power conference, but your campus is healthy with its institution and everything there. So in that situation, I was curious what you were going to say about the power conference question, because I don't do gotcha questions. I was just kind of curious the thinking, because I really don't think it's necessary. Now, maybe one day it changes, but I really, I was just kind of curious on the group of five and the CFP. I mean, what kind of exposure do you think that, from your perspective, gives an institution like you?
Well, I mean, I want to go back just a second to the other. I'm also thrilled in the American to have an in-state rival with ECU, and having that has created all sorts of opportunities for us. So I mean, that has been probably the best thing for us, is having teams that are strong and create rivalries, which I think is fantastic. I would say that for the CFP, I think there is obviously expansion and access, and I think we have to just continue to see how it plays out. I think we feel good about it right now, and it's something we're not in a position to be in the playoffs. When that comes, then we'll be excited to see how that plays out, right?
Yeah.
I think there are some schools, obviously, in the American that have that potential. So that's good.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it shakes out over the few years. So,
Right.
in the sake of time, I'm gonna ask probably one more subset of questions that I've been trying to ask
Okay.
anytime I am fortunate to have a president or a chancellor on, because it's similar to my dissertation topic, but something I'm just also curious about. So, I recently had an athletic director on, and he was from Toledo. So, Brian Blair, he's been doing great things at Toledo. And I told him the way he described his role and his approach to the role sounded like the approach of a college president. And so, having worked for athletic directors and college presidents, I feel like I probably see these things a little different because I see your calendars and the
Right.
people you meet with, the responsibilities, the expectations. But I know the importance is a very different thing to a university with your roles. But just kind of curious, do you see any similarities between those two roles in today's kind of college environment?
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, we're both leading large organizations with lots of stakeholders and lots of people on the outside that have opinions and then share them on social media. So, yes, I do think so. Clearly, ultimately, I mean, athletics rolls up to the president or chancellor is responsible for it. So, if something happens, I mean, the AD is responsible, but the chancellor or president is also held responsible. So I think they are very similar, and sort of a microcosm. And then everybody obviously thinks they can do either job, right? I mean, because that's what they all comment on, their opinions about what you're doing well and then what you're not doing so well. So,
Well, since the jobs are pretty similar, I mean, I'll ask kind of two parting advice questions. I mean, one advice would question, how do you handle having so many different constituent groups and with such a visible role, and you lead such a large team? I mean, for those that are in a modern AD role that maybe are looking for advice from a different source, I mean, how do you kind of manage it all?
I I try, I mean, I had said this earlier. I like lots of opinions. I like input. I like to hear what's going on. I mean, what I think is you can't be everywhere and know everything. And so people have to share that information. I mean, sometimes I do read something on social media about something happening on campus, and I'll ask some people, like, what is this referring to, or what's going on here, and figure out if we can improve that or fix that issue. I had one day when a dining hall had shut down early and students were tweeting at me, and I'm like, oh my, what happened? And it turned out that there was some issue there that needed to be resolved. So, I mean, that sort of thing makes a lot of sense. I think sort of the advice between the two and the similarity is continue to think big picture. I have internal stakeholders here, students and faculty and staff, and I have external stakeholders, the alums, the legislature, the system office, the donors, and I have to balance all of that, and they're not always aligned. And I think the AD has some of that too, especially on a campus where there are student fees that are going into athletics. They have to think about, how do we help our students have access and see this and participate and enjoy this? So, I mean, I love thinking about those things because in general, one person's idea isn't the only way that it should be. There are so many different ideas coming in, and you take pieces of that and kind of bring it together to create something that is better than one person could think of.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the D1 ticker people are starting to see that athletic directors also have to be thinking about their legislatures too, and
Absolutely.
now they're going to Congress together in groups and things like that, and that's just it's becoming more and more like a college president.
Yeah.
Well, last question for advice is, so I'm doing my dissertation on the process of hiring ADs and what college presidents actually value in their candidates.
Okay.
So a lot of people know that presidents use search firms for athletic director searches, but presidents still are really heavily involved in the rest of campus too on who they're going to pick. Now, I had to change the question because you inherited a great AD in Mike Hill, who will hopefully be there and never leave. So I'll reframe this question for advice. So if you were talking to a group of aspirational athletic directors and you were trying to tell them how to become an athletic director, what responsibilities or experiences do you think they need to have or currently be collecting to be ready for the demands of a D1 AD position? So it could be their background, their own normative career pattern, but also maybe their skill set of institutional fit, things like that.
I think we would all say fundraising is critically important, and it's become more important, obviously, as NIL has come to light, and that we're all thinking about how do you build the capital and how do you have the resources for teams, but now how do you also get the resources for the players, which is a little bit different, or the funds for Alston or that sort of thing. So fundraising, I think, always moves up to the top, but the reality is, um, I mean, it's somebody who can speak to an audience, who is honest and transparent, and who understands the vision of, we have to make sure that students come here, and assuming they're staying for a little bit of time, that they retain and they graduate, so they understand the student part of it, and we have to work cooperatively. So I think I am very fortunate, and I told Mike that even if I hadn't inherited him, I would have picked him, which is a really nice thing. And we work really well together, and there are times when he will say, Sharon, I hear what you're saying. Let me explain this position. And I'll say, okay, well, you've helped me there. So, I mean, we can take our ideas and bounce off of each other to be able to grow. So that's a nice thing. But I think fundraising, speaking to a crowd, honesty, transparency, working on student success and growing outstanding young women and young men to be able to grow up. And we know that student athletes are generally leaders in their community going into the future. Those are all really important.
Yeah, and since you did say fundraising was the most popular one, I did notice in an interview you had done that I just want to highlight is because when you were in that provost role, you and provosts do fundraise, but you had learned from fundraising from your president, I think at Arkansas, that helped you when you got to Toledo. And so I don't want to discourage people that if they have no fundraising experience, find like learn about it while you're in a different role too. I mean, there's got to be, you had mentioned that also it's talking to a crowd. Okay, well, maybe you haven't asked anyone for money, but maybe you can get better at, speaking to different groups. And so just, I don't want to, some people have not been able to get that experience yet, but they've got to find at least skills that can kind of build that up, right?
I absolutely agree. And also in conversation, even with your AD, put together a plan that you might be able to work on some aspect of what is their overall fundraising campaign, because there are going to be pieces that are relevant to whether you're doing facilities for athletics or whether you're doing student success for athletics or compliance. There are things you can do. And PS, every campus wants more people assisting in fundraising because it's what we do overall that will help our students succeed. So I think there are great opportunities, and sometimes you have to ask to be a part of that, or figure out where you can tie in.
Well, Dr. Gaber, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast. We scheduled this a long time ago, and I know you've followed me with the podcast before, so I appreciate that. And I just really impressed with your institution and how you're leading it. So I just want to thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. It's been great.